Hello, my friend, and welcome to the picnic table. This is not my picnic table at home, but it'll do just fine. The Sirui 35mm 1.6 full frame anamorphic lens with declicked and geared aperture and focus rings has been amazing for me, and I'm so happy to be talking about it today. However, before I continue, I do need to clarify they sent me this lens to be reviewed. They have absolutely no input on what I say. In the past, I have reviewed a different Sirui anamorphic lens from a different series of lenses of theirs, and it was the 50mm, and I did not love it. I returned it. And it was a great experience for me to try anamorphic on a budget because I learned some of the things that I do and I don't love about anamorphic in general and what I'm looking for in lenses specifically. I would say the things that I'm looking for most specifically are for the lens to have a unique character about it that I don't get from a spherical lens, but also at the same time, not to have an excessive amount of fake character, you could say. I didn't want it to look cheesy. I didn't want it to look overdone, and the blue streak oftentimes just didn't do it for me. So this is a neutral flare on this particular lens. They have blue options, but this is a neutral flare, and we'll cover more on that in a minute. The lens really has nice character to it outside of the anamorphic qualities. Just the lens, the glass, has a great color rendition, a beautiful richness about it. And somehow I felt like the colors were slightly more pastel than when using my Sigma, which is almost like clinically perfect and sharp. I just loved that because it almost gave it a vintage feel, which is something I'm looking for when I use an anamorphic, is that I'm looking for the lens to lend a character to the image beyond just the anamorphic components. That was one of the big ones that I was looking out for. I also didn't want it to be cumbersome. I didn't want it to be large or oversized, and the other lens was a good size, but other anamorphic options out there are not, or the adapters end up being silly and large and difficult to work with. If you've watched my channel before, you would know, and if you haven't, then here's the first time to tell you, I do not want to have excessive gear in my life. I want to have a camera and a lens, and if necessary, a monitor, which we'll touch on later, but I want to stay as lightweight and as run as gun as possible. So anyway, this lens has begun already off to a great start because it is tiny, it is lightweight, it is easy to use. And yes, the monitor part will come up later, but for the time being, it checks the box of not being cumbersome. Another thing that I wanted was the 1.6 or larger aspect ratio. 1.6 or 2 was what I was looking for because I found that at 1.33, I just wasn't getting the compression that I wanted. I wasn't getting enough of that anamorphic character in bokeh because for me, the anamorphic is not primarily about the flaring so much as it is about the actual bokeh and the shape of the look. So I would say those were the big things that I was looking for in an anamorphic lens, and so far, this lens from Sirui has checked all of those boxes. Then there's the price. I had to be realistic with myself because there's no way that I am affording several $1,000 anamorphic lenses. So I was looking in the $1,000 range for the adapters or for the lenses or for whatever I was trying to find with anamorphic. I had to stay probably close to $1,000 for a single lens or for a single adapter system, and this lens coming in right about $1,200 checked that box for me as well. Now, moving on to the negative aspects of this lens, knowing a little bit about anamorphic, I knew that there were going to be some things that I just couldn't overcome in this lens, and that is the close focusing distance is just very far away. That's something about anamorphic you have to live with a little bit, at least. There may be some ways that you can circumvent that, but for the most part, that's a reality. I said I would circle back on this, but the cumbersome nature of using a monitor with anamorphic lenses is something that I don't always love. But at 1.6, I don't really feel a deep need to be using a monitor. I can certainly get away without it, and I did for a whole wedding day. So I used this lens for a whole wedding day at 3x2 6K on the Fuji X-H2S, and yes, there are some shots where it's slightly soft, but to the point of the lens character, this has a beautiful character that when it's a little bit soft, I really didn't mind. And I love the look even then, and it's a look. I mean, when you're using anamorphic and you're using a manually focusing lens, you don't expect to always nail it every single time. Even in major motion picture films, we don't see them always hit their tack sharp focus. Yes, you should probably be using a monitor. You can get away without it. At 1.6, the compression ratio isn't so severe that you could never use it without a monitor, but at 1.6, it is stronger than a 1.3, and you would probably be better off by using a monitor, of course. Now, I say this part a tiny bit hypocritically, but I do wish at times that there was a little more flare. I do love the characteristic of the flare. I love that it is very gentle, it's not overpowering, but sometimes it would be just a little bit nicer if I could see slightly more flare in some situations where I thought I could expect it. But if I was gonna lean in either direction, I would much rather have it be not overpowering than it be overpowering. So right there in between balance would be amazing, and this almost struck that balance, but at the budget, at this price point, at about $1,200, somewhere in that range, this is incredibly affordable, and I can't expect way too much of it. This is a really, really great flare, and it's not overpowering, which is the way that I would prefer it. And then there was the fact that it's a T2.9, and again, that's just the nature of anamorphic. That's a part of the life of using these lenses, is that you don't get the most hyper shallow depth of field. However, with that said, the lens still provides a great depth, which I'll touch on in a moment, but it does provide a great depth even at 2.9 and at 35 millimeter because of the nature of anamorphic, but you don't get much lower in terms of the grabbing of light, which will matter for me at wedding receptions, for instance, but in many other scenarios where I'm using natural light as my primary source. Any of my complaints truthfully are concerning the nature of anamorphic, and with this particular lens, maybe the flare could be slightly more prevalent at times, but again, if I have to lean in either direction, I would much rather have it this way. So would I recommend this lens? That's a difficult question because it really depends on who is using it. Because if you are looking for anamorphic and you're looking for it on a budget and you want to own that lens, whereas a lot of people rent high-end anamorphics, if you would like to own that lens and you're looking for something that's lightweight, that's small, that has a good lens flare, has good lens characteristics at 1.6 rather than at 1.3, which is a lot of other budget lenses, then yes, absolutely. I think this is an awesome option for you. Now, do most people need to be shooting anamorphic? Probably not. I don't think that you would need to be shooting anamorphic necessarily for most videos, for most scenarios, for most clients in most situations. But if you're looking for anamorphic, then yes, I can absolutely recommend this lens. That's pretty much all I have for this video. It's not me trying to sell you this lens because there are lots of great lenses out there. You can go buy any of them from any of the resellers. You can buy adapters. You can buy anything that gets you the anamorphic look in a way that suits your workflow. However, this lens works for my workflow, and I think I am going to be continuing to use this moving forward for a variety of projects. I'm really excited to have this now because I think that the anamorphic look is going to work its way into more projects since it's not as cumbersome, since it's not as phony with that blue streak sometimes, and this is just checking the right boxes for me at the right price point. If you have any questions at all, you'll leave them below because I probably left some stuff out that you might want to know about. So don't hesitate, ask me those questions. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Bless, my friend.